future, talk radio will actually educate, inspire, and make you think. The future is now. Topics and music that affect your life from Universal Broadcasting Network. Tune in at ubnradio.com.
And greetings and salutations, everyone. You have once again tuned into Great Sex with Dr. Don. And I'm your host, Walt Lusk, with Dr. Don Etkes. He is a licensed marriage and family child counselor and has a PhD in psychology. And from UCLA is trained as a sex therapist for over 3 decades, for over 30 years, folks. And we are on live every other Monday at 7 o'clock Pacific here at UBN, Universal Broadcasting Network. And you can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, here at UBN Radio, and of course, YouTube. We have a growing channel on YouTube. You can watch, like, share, and comment. So we're going to start the show with a quote, I think, as we always do.
Yes. The quote of the day is from Mae West, a great lady. I actually had the pleasure of seeing her lecture once at Ackerman Union at UCLA. Oh, she looked fabulous.
I'm sure she did.
Yes. And she said, "Too much of a good thing can be wonderful."
All right, we'll save my favorite Mae West quote for another time. The last week's show we did, which is our brand spanking new show, was why bother with the whole thing? Why bother have sex? And if you want to know more about that, go check out last week's show, because our last show. This show is Sex Therapy Secrets. Since Dr. Don's specialty is in sex therapy, we thought we would do some secrets of sex therapy. And we also start with sex in the news. So I found a couple of interesting articles we're going to comment on. First one is Risky Business. Places that Americans specifically have had sex outside of the bedroom in very different and unique places. And they did bizarre locations of what 2,000 Americans have had. 23% admitting to even getting caught while having sex in different and unique places. 69% of people admitted they had sex in a place where they risked being caught by someone, but over 60% said having sex somewhere other than the bedroom made them happier in their relationship.
People are trying to grab for excitement, and sometimes unusual places help. However, be aware that sometimes you can get into trouble. So Dr. Don will talk about this, but he is not advocating, so please don't tell the police officer that your sex therapist assigned this to you. I only give suggestions, and you have to decide what's right for you, your values, and also your local area. There are probably places in the world where they're going to whip you publicly if you do certain things, and of course some of you might be into that. Yes. But that's another story, and that will be another show.
That's it will.
Yes.
You know what? If you have a roommate, you might want to change the sheets because 12% have had sex on their roommate's bed.
You can get one of those ultraviolet lights and check out your sheets each time, and then have a talk with your roommate if you find any spots.
68 said they've done it in a car, while 48% have gotten lucky in the kitchen. And a sneaky 9% have gone the distance in a movie theater. For me, the one that was the craziest place to have one, and you ladies are going to groan and moan because I commented on this with a few this week, is a porta potty.
You get into a lot of trouble if it's not stable.
Oh, my
Lord.
Lord.
You got to watch out for that. Yeah, public embarrassment really cuts through the pleasure of sex. So be careful where you choose these places. And
76% have had it outdoors. And 48 have done it on the beach, 31 in a hiking trail, and 27% on a highway rest stop, which I thought was really a high number.
Well, hugging trees can be a lot of fun depending on what you're doing.
Absolutely. Other places is 16. Let's see. Other places was a phone booth at the Epcot, fast food drive-through. Gosh, how long was that line? In a car during an automatic car wash. A New York City subway, risky business indeed, and a parking lot in a stadium before the baseball game, and on right field during the baseball game.
Well, I have to wonder whether they got live coverage on that one.
So there are some interesting places, and if you want to call in, of course, this is a call-in show, and you can tell us where you have had a very interesting place where you've had sex. And the number is area code 323-843-2826. That's 323-843-2826. And one other article I just couldn't pass up on, it was 2 transgender couples marry. And what this means is we had an Army officer who had a sex change. He went from a he to a she, and she's 6'3", and he was an actor and went from a she to a he. And I'm trying to figure this out because look at the picture. He has facial hair, so it's kind of interesting. And they're in London, so this is from The Sun in England.
And the wonderful thing about this story, this is about 2 people in love, and regardless of orientation or equipment, love continues to exist and flourish. And it's so wonderful that we've begun to live in an age where people really truly recognize that what's important is that people are in love and not what they do with their plumbing.
Yes, and as I say, quote, we're just the same as everybody else. Our flaws and ups and downs, but just a little bit different.
There's a lot of difference between people, even within the same orientation. I all the time deal with couples who are just trying to be more sexual and yet have a lot of differences in their mind without being transgender or many other orientations. Just heterosexuals have a lot of issues within trying to find out what feels good and how they can feel valued and how they can communicate. And that's a lot of what goes into sex therapy, is learning about all of that. And again, I've seen people of many different orientations. Everybody has their challenges. It's just normal. Nobody tells you really how to do all this stuff and how to handle your bodies. And it's always a learning curve, regardless of the relationship or the orientation that you're in.
So to start off with, Doctor, what do you think the difference is between regular therapy with a therapist and sex therapy?
Well, the main thing that goes on for me as a sex therapist is I'm specially trained to deal with the intimacy of sex. Some therapists really have a difficulty with talking about it, and so that's one of the ways that I get referrals. Also, some people would be shocked to know I've dealt with health professionals, physicians, who can't really talk about sex. And probably the most surprising is I've known some urologists who aren't comfortable talking with people about their sex lives. They can talk about the physiology, but they can't really say anything about sex. And then there are a number of therapists out there that have difficulties with really getting into intimate details. For instance, I consult with other therapists. They come to me about asking about issues about sex therapy, sex addiction, other aspects of sensuality. And I remember one therapist, I was asking her about what she'd gotten in the way of sexual history from this particular man she was working with. I asked, how often does he masturbate? And she looked at me and she said, I couldn't ask him that. He'd hit me.
Hit your doctor. Well, that's my saying is you're saying urologists can't or won't?
It depends. Oh, there are many, many urologists, and there are many other therapists out there that can talk in great detail about sex. But there are other people, they can talk about a lot of aspects of relationships, but they don't feel comfortable talking about sex. And so that's one of my sources of referrals.
Well, maybe they need to speak to a sex therapist so they're more comfortable with their own sexuality.
Yeah, and that's one of the things in sex therapy. One of the things I learned when I first started was what was called the SAR, Sexual Attitude Reassessment, where you have to really find that you're comfortable, deal with the words that people use. People will talk about penis or vagina, but then they'll say many other words that other people wouldn't be comfortable with, but as a sex therapist, I'm very comfortable with that. And then the other thing that's very different from me from other therapists is that I actually can, depending on the situation, give assignments of physical exercises for couples to do with each other sexually in the privacy of their own home.
One of the things I read here is that you guys as sex therapists assign homework.
Well, many therapists assign homework. The question is what type of homework.
Yes.
And the type of homework I do, also very much of it is homework about how to think, how to communicate, assignments along those lines, but also differently from other therapists, a number of the home assignments I give, and I call them, life assignments. Some of them are very physical, to do this or that physically with each other. Some of it's very sexual. Some of it's simply to hold hands more, or to hug more, or to have more cuddling time. One of the ways to really kill sex is to have an absolute time. You have to show up at 3 p.m. and have sex. Particularly the couples I work with that are having fertility problems, it really can be a killer. They absolutely have a time you're going to have sex. But I talk in terms of having a cuddling time, and then that may work out to be a sexual time. So part of what I do is I try to reduce tension, which is usually what is interfering with functioning.
One thing I found I wanted to comment on is kissing. I'm a big proponent and a believer of it, but a kiss is not just a kiss. The researcher, one guy says 80% of couples who aren't kissing regularly aren't having regular sex.
The issue with the kissing is about intimacy. We keep talking about sex, but overall, the biggest question for a relationship is really how much intimacy and sensuality they enjoy. No matter how sexual a couple is, and I've known of some couples that are extremely sexual, that still works out to be just a portion of their relationship. And the question is, what are they doing elsewhere? And kissing is one of the ways to really connect on a more sensual level, and it can really enhance the making of love and the sexual delights if you really have that connection that kissing can bring. And there's many, many different levels of kissing, which is something that I will discuss with couples.
In terms of things that you might not know about sex therapy, it can make you more confident in and out of the bedroom. Have you found that to be the case?
Oh, very much so. Everything is interrelated. This is one of the things I teach in my practice, because I'm, in addition to having a PhD in psychology, I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist. So one of the critical things to understand is you don't just put your sex in one corner and then your family and your finances and your work and your relationships over in different corners. They all interrelate. If you've had a lousy day with sex, it's going to make things not feel very good for you at work or with family. If you're doing really well with your family or your work, hopefully that feeds into your feeling even better with your sensuality and your sexuality. So part of it is to realize it all flows together, and you just don't put it in one corner and work on it. It's important to work on all of your life so that you have a greater sex life.
And last week when we talked about why bother even having sex, one of the advantages was if you have it in the morning, it gets you in a better mood and you might have a better day and you might do your job better. Which would relieve stress, and everything's connected.
Yeah, that's one of the ways to potentially start out. However, everybody's a little different about their biological clock as far as sex, and it's perfectly fine if they're into sex in the afternoons or just the evenings. The question is the quality. People get hung up on the quantity. And what I teach and what as a sex therapist is about having a higher quality of sensuality so you feel more satisfied in many areas of your life. And then that ratchets down tension in things like your work potentially, your family, your finances, and that in turn makes everything flow together better and increases the enjoyment you have in sex.
One of the things was, can you expand on that a little bit, quality versus quantity? Because, maybe one couple, they want to do it like every other day or every day, and others it's once a week. And some say, well, once a week, that's not enough. So, what's average is a question, but can you expand on that?
Well, the most important thing to realize, and when people get trapped in numbers and thinking that they want to find out that they're good enough if they do it a certain thing a certain number of times, and then they're going to be a good person. There is no right or wrong number of times to have sex. There are actually couples out there that are having zero sex in their relationship, and they're totally happy. I've worked with couples and seen where they're having sex 5 times a day, and they feel horrible with each other. The only time they can stand each other is when they're having sex. And so it's not about the numbers. It's about the quality that you feel good enough in yourself, and pushing that there's a certain right number. And there's a lot of different studies and feelings about what's average. But what's important is what's good for you, not for the other couple or the other person out there. What you're trying to learn is what feels good for you. It doesn't matter ultimately what that person is doing next door or what's happening elsewhere. What you're looking for is what feels good within your own heart and body. That's why some couples are totally fine with having zero sex in their relationships, although they tend to be fewer and farther between than other couples, but they exist out there.
Are they 80 or?
No, they're couples, even their 20s, 30s.
Wow.
Couples out there have solutions at any age. Couples have problems at any age. The youngest couple I ever worked with that had sexual issues was 18 and 19. It was a guy and woman, and they basically were having functional issues for the guy, and that happens even at 18. There's a very broad generality out there that's sometimes said. And remember, when I say things, they're very broadly general. There's always exceptions. But the thing is that the saying sometimes is that at 20% of the 20-year-olds are having functional problems. At 30% of the 30-year-olds are having functional problems. 40-year-olds, 40% are having problems, and on up. But there's exceptions. There are people that are having fabulous and wonderful sex lives in their 90s. There's no age limit. It's about how good you feel in your primary sex organ, which is your brain, which is a lot of what I do in sex therapy. I teach people to relax and feel good within their brains so they feel so much better in their bodies and have great sex.
Well, one thing I know you're not going to ask them to do is take their clothes off.
No, I don't, and that's a misnomer. What happened, actually, part of how that came about is some of the original sex therapy work was done by Masters and Johnson.
Yes.
And they had a clinic where people would come in. It was it was not a workable model for everyday therapy, which is typically 50 minutes. There's therapists who do 45 minutes, but I do a 50-minute session. I have offices in Claremont and Westwood, and I see people there, and then you can do very much in sex therapy within 50 minutes. But Masters and Johnson, when they were doing their earlier work, at times they would have couples come in and be there for days at a time, and they would film them having sex, and they watched through a one-way mirror. There wasn't anybody like right next to the bed with a clipboard, but still they were actually watched by therapists having sex, and then there was commentary and work that was given as far as assignments behind that, but that isn't workable for a 50-minute session. And so, but that many people mistake that somehow something sexual happens in the office because of the early work of Masters and Johnson. But nobody has sex in my office. I've been doing this for over 30 years continuously as a sex therapist. Nobody does this, and to the best of my knowledge, nobody's had sex in the waiting room.
And you don't have to worry about saying anything taboo. Is it safe to say that you just might have heard it all?
It's very possible. The sex is incredibly diversified out there, and every once in a while I hear something that I haven't heard, but pretty much I've heard it all, and it's perfectly fine. People come into my office and they swear at times about how they talk about sex. It's perfectly fine. I have no value judgments about what people choose to do with their plumbing or how they talk. I just want them to feel comfortable, and that's a lot of what I do as a sex therapist, is give people permission to be comfortable and talk about stuff they don't usually talk about so that they can find solutions.
Well, do you think that it can help people who already have great sex lives have better ones?
Yes, this is one of the things that's great out there for people to reach out and do fine-tuning. Now, one of the things that's been happening lately, which I really welcome, is more and more couples are doing prenuptial counseling. Mm-hmm. And part of that can involve what are they going to be doing with their sex lives to make them better. So I think that's wonderful. I mean, people out there are required to do various tests and go through courses of training in order to drive a car and get a driver's license. But to get a marriage license, you don't have anything you have to know. And it's so much better if people come in and really look at ways to communicate as well as be sensual so that they can have happier marriages in the future.
Talking about that, it just might save your marriage.
Oh, very much so. Well, that's a lot of what my work is. I tend to see people in established relationships. I've seen people who actually been in relationships for 20 or 30 years. And they reach a certain point. The reason why people wait that long is they get to magic numbers. People in the population think about what's going to happen when they're 30, 40, 50. So somebody might be in a marriage where they think, well, it'll always get better next year. But once they hit 30 or 40 or 50, they say, wait a minute, no, I'm not going to go on with this like that. And so that's when people tend to come in. when they hit certain numbers and enough time has gone by and they're dissatisfied and they want some fine tuning, and I'm there to help.
Because I've read that, in a situation like that where there is a problem and you hope it'll get better or you hope it'll go away and you delay, that sometimes adds insult to injury and makes things worse, as opposed to taking a little more of a proactive approach and saying, hey, there's a challenge, maybe we should sit down and do something talk about it.
Yeah, part of the hardest part of my work is that people wait too long and they wind up particularly saying some horribly negative things to each other, and they've created a history that makes it harder to overcome and just be able to relax and enjoy each other sensually. So that can be worked through, but the longer they've gone on, particularly with negative interactions, the harder it is to make things better. Now, at any point, things can be made better, and I've worked with some couples that had horrible problems, and they were able to work it through. But the longer they wait, the less there's a likelihood of being able to make things work if they've said particularly horrible things to each other, or in some cases done terrible things. So the best thing is for people, once they've tried, and I think it's fine for them to try to work out things on their own, but if they don't seem to be connecting, that's when they need to consider coming into a therapist before they get into more issues that sabotage their relationship.
Would you say that your patients don't really stay with you for a long time? In other words, isn't a really long and drawn out process, or is it short term, or what's your experience?
It depends on what is being presented. If it's simple, usually I don't see simple informational problems like how to do this or that. Occasionally I do. I have people with various lifestyles or are thinking about being in various lifestyles. For instance, like getting into swinging, and they just want some information about how to handle that, and can it be worked out in their relationship. Those are informational issues generally. However, most couples who present sexual issues, it's the tip of the iceberg. For a number of couples, and also individuals. I mean, I see men and women individually as well as couples. And the men are coming in for erection problems, the women are coming in for orgasmic problems, the couples tend to come in for lack of desire, meaning one or the other is not as much into sex as the other. I tend to, the issues I deal with tend to be either people having too much sex or too little sex. And so I do what I can to be of help to them, and it depends on how much each person cooperates. But I've had couples where I've worked with them just for a few weeks, and then there are couples that need much longer term work because, again, the sex issues are a symptom and not the actual problem. And the real issue is because they're not communicating and they don't feel comfortable in their main sex organ in their head. And that takes a lot longer to work with.
Well, interesting you say that, because one here says it can help you become a better communicator. It's not always about sexual functioning. In your daily experiences, the husband might say, take out the trash, or the wife say, well, go change the baby's diaper. Sex therapy can help you communicate in a more loving way. We won't talk about makeup sex, but, how to fight fair and choose to lose a battle and win the war. Communication.
Yeah, that's very much so, and also how to handle your emotions. It isn't all about sex organs, it's really about what's happening in your brain and your emotions, and what I work on is helping individuals and couples to raise their emotional intelligence so they react more positively and less negatively. And that's, part of my being a licensed marriage and family therapist is even when I see singles, there's always relationship issues. And the biggest relationship issue, by the way, is within one's own self.
Yeah, with yourself.
That's the pillar of being with other people. And the first thing is to feel good in yourself and to make sure you're doing things that feel good for you. If you're doing something sexual with somebody else and you feel lousy about it and you're not really in touch with yourself and you let that go on, eventually it builds up resentment and negative feelings under the surface, and then it eventually can blow up in your face as far as interfering or sabotaging a relationship.
Another advantage is it can solve a range of sexual problems, maybe with libido as a result of maybe a disability, or one of your partner has a cancer or some form of dysfunction. And that's a situation that you didn't sign up for, but here we are, and we're in this situation.
Yeah, and that's part of what I do with people is help them. They're in a new situation. They had this great life, and then something changed as far as disease or a disability. and how do you cope with it now? So I've done a lot of work with that. Particularly, I've seen some tragic situations with various illnesses, and then unfortunately, in terms of referring, what I'm saying is other than illnesses, part of it is, for instance, the results of traffic accidents. People can wind up losing a limb or they can wind up paralyzed. So I've worked with various people with disabilities to help them to sort out what to do with their relationship and their sexuality now that this illness or disability has occurred.
And it really can bring back that loving feeling, because remember that first time you kissed your spouse or held their hand? You want to reclaim those feelings of excitement and desire? Sex therapy really can help. It can get the couples back to the early days of making out on the couch, holding hands, kissing, saying hello and goodbye, and having sex.
A lot of it is just doing things differently in a way that feels so much better for you. So some of the specific things I can assign, it depends on the couple and to what degree they're having any emotional challenges with each other. But some of the simpler things to do is just get out and do things that you may not have done ever, or it's been a long time since you did them. For instance, going to a Love Boutique, which is a shop that has potentially sex toys and lingerie. There are very few shops out there that are the old style shops, which were just videos and boots in the back for men who might be wearing trench coats, whatever. This is the old adage about these sex stores. They've really become couple boutiques. And so it's fun to go in and be playful. Even if you don't buy a single thing, just go in and look at the toys, look at the lingerie, and fantasize and kid each other. I often assign to people, some of these stores have outrageous X-rated gift cards. So one of the fun things you can do is when you go to one of these stores, look and see if they have cards. And then if they do, joke with each other which family member or friend you might send which card to. It's a great icebreaker to really have more fun in terms of looking at things in the store and just being playful with each other.
That's a great idea. Or buy one and then mail it to your spouse. Hide it under the pillow. If you're just tuning in, thanks for doing that. You've tuned in to Great Sex with Dr. Don here at Universal Broadcasting Network, UBN Radio. You can find us on ubnradio.com, Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn, and soon to be iHeartRadio. And this is a call-in show, and you can call us at area code 323-843-2826, 323-843-2826. And if you have a question that you just don't want to pick up the phone and call, and we totally understand, you can actually write us at info at greatsexwithdrdon.com. So, usually one or the other partners is having an issue in many instances, and I know that you don't have to bring your partner for starters, but I assume you recommend that you do bring your partner if you can?
It depends on what the situation is, but usually that you're very correct. It's I want to see both people. Sometimes I see them individually as well as a couple. Depends on what the presenting situation is. But typically, this is an issue for the couple, and it needs to be worked out together. And so part of what I do, whether I see individuals or couples, I'm getting a sexual history. I'm finding out the history of what relationships they've had, if they're just a single, and what they're doing currently, and then as a couple, what their history is as a couple. And from that, I can determine and begin to customize the therapy for them, because what works for one couple can be totally different from another couple.
I love this comment. It goes, like your job, your family, and your mental health or relationship history, your sex life does not exist in a vacuum.
No, it all interacts. And one of the things to remember is there are a lot of ways to have a great sensual life with each other. And one of the ways that people suppress themselves is they keep thinking in terms of sex being intercourse. That's one of my questions. Usually, what does sex mean to you? And most people will answer intercourse. But that puts a lot of performance pressure on oneself. And also realizing that everything else draws back into sex, and the sex affects everything else. Again, to have a broader view of what the situation is. And sometimes the answer is to have a lot more affection in one's life, and not just to think in terms that, well, we have to have this intercourse and then we have an orgasm. Too many people turn it into work.
Or makes it make it really mechanical.
Yeah, they make sex into a job.
Yeah.
And who wants to go to a job every night as well as during the day. And that's part of what I have to teach people. And that's the main thing, is just to learn and relax and communicate. And again, there's a lot of issues and things that can sabotage oneself and one's head and past. And this is part of the complexity that goes into figuring out what's right for one particular person versus another.
And as we talked about last week, one of the important things, guys, is cuddling is really, really important, especially afterward, for maybe not trying to put a clock on it, but 5 or 10 minutes, because you still are feeling the aura and the after effects and the afterglow, if you will, and it can make a big difference in your relationship. I've found that to be the case.
Yeah, and I've seen that many times. I think it's a very important word that I want people to learn, because everybody hears about foreplay, but I don't hear enough that people hear about afterplay.
Right.
You know, that somehow, you know, you have this intercourse, you hopefully have an orgasm. By the way, it's perfectly fine if you don't have an orgasm. You can still be wonderful. And the question is, what do you do afterwards? You know, cuddling, holding. Does somebody just get up and go to the next room? I mean, that's a way for a person to feel very isolated.
Turn on the television.
Yes, indeed.
Yikes.
Yeah. The only exception is if you're turning on the Great Sex with Dr. Don show.
Exactly. And you can watch that on YouTube. It can make sex, talking about sex, way less terrifying, and sometimes talking about it is a very big relief. Have you found that to be true?
Well, that's one of the critical things, is to talk about it. This is how people learn. And that's one of the assignments that I often give to individuals and couples, is to learn what really pleases the other. And I've had couples that have been together many years, and some of them in long-term marriages of 10 years or more, and they really don't know what pleases the other person physically. They're just doing what pleases them. One of the key things, for instance, in talking in techniques, one of the things is really, how does your partner masturbate? Usually that tells you and can show you what really pleases them. And that's one of the things to consider in a relationship, is when you're with somebody and you're really learning about sex together, is simply showing each other and sharing how you masturbate, so the other person knows more how to touch you, rather than just sometimes words aren't enough to really convey that. So actually seeing how somebody pleasures themselves can make all the difference in having great sex.
I agree, but going back to that kissing example, you know, if you want to go back to basics in terms of kissing, the article suggested kiss your partner for about 10 seconds, how you want to be kissed. And then they kiss you of how they want to be kissed, and then figure out and ask, hey, how do you like to be kissed? Which then that question can be expanded of other things. How do you like to pleasure here, there, and the other? But I think, you know, just starting with kissing, for example, really can be intimate and connecting all on its own, and you don't have to take your clothes off.
Yeah, and everybody varies about how deeply they kiss in terms of how much tongue they're using versus how much they kiss on the lips. Some people love to be kissed, you know, like 5 times on the head, and it's as good as a deep French kiss. It depends on the person. Each one varies so tremendously. We're like snowflakes about how much pleasure we feel where in our body. Snowflakes have all these unique cellular structures, and their crystals vary so much. And our nerve endings vary so much. So where we like to be kissed, on our mouth or on their face, can vary tremendously from person to person. And one of the big, you know, difficulties is that people tend to be physical or to kiss exactly the way they did with their last relationship. And it's so important to share with that person what feels good for you.
Because again, it really is about the space between your ears and communication.
Very much so. And the emphasis is really on the communication.
Yes.
Bodies are very easy to learn if you're really open to it. Minds can take a lifetime. There are people out there that may know a lot about their partner sexually, but they may not fully know them as a person. So the greatest intimacy is not sex. It's knowing somebody's mind and heart. That's the true depth of that person. There's actually a saying out there that's scary for some people. There was a poem I learned when I was an undergraduate in UCLA, which is, I'm afraid to show you who I am, because if I show you who I am and you don't like who I am, that's all I have. So a lot of people are afraid to show who they are fully and to share that intimacy because they're afraid of rejection. And so part of true intimacy is being open to sharing with that person and finding out that that other person shares with you.
I like that a lot. One here suggests always use the mantra instead of, am I doing it right? Which kind of, is an insecure kind of question. Say, tell me how you want to be touched.
That's a very, very important thing. Again, in communication. And by the way, the best time to talk about sex is before or after. If you wind up talking during sex, well, I want you to do this 3 inches to the left, you tend to get into your head. And that's one of the ways to shut down orgasms for both women and men. Men also can get shut down with orgasms. And so the way to open up is to discuss, how it felt for you. For instance, when you've made love, you can talk afterwards. Well, how did that feel for you? What would feel better for you? And see what that person can add as far as communication versus going into your head and starting to be really performance oriented and just looking at yourself. I have more than a few people will say if they really talk about sex while they're having sex, they wind up going into the head and they do start to do what I call spectatoring. It's like they're on the ceiling looking down at themselves and they're not truly feeling in their body. And that's a way to shut off really enjoying your body.
So that's kind of like being an observer versus a participant, if you will.
Yes, exactly. Even though you're literally there and you're touching a person and they're touching you physically, you can get so lost in your mind intellectually that you really don't feel your body. Even though it's literally there physically, you're off in a different realm watching these people together, but not really being part of it ultimately.
I can't find the quote, but to paraphrase, Doctor, I read something about women specifically need to get a little bit more in a trance and get, kind of into sex more than guys do. And, we're terrible about, doing a little bit of foreplay and kind of warming them up a little bit and getting them in the mood and the mode as opposed to just putting it in.
I would like, basically the men to consider adopting the mantra of women come first.
Yeah, excellent. Absolutely.
It's really a matter that because of physiology and also biology over time, men pretty much generally, if they're going to ejaculate, they do it much sooner than women. If they're going to reach orgasm, than women reach orgasm. So it takes generally a woman a lot longer to feel that pleasure. There's always exceptions to all of this. There are men who take longer, there are women who take less time, but overall I'm talking in generalities that women tend to take a lot longer to feel pleasure. Plus part of what's going on is they need to feel safe in their minds. That's part of what's going on, consciously or subconsciously.
Absolutely.
They're assessing, is this person really caring about me? Am I safe in this situation? And that's part about their learning to let go. And so a man who takes more time, or another woman with a woman, is showing that they care, or another man with another man. Taking more time to show your partner that you care is going to generally increase the pleasure that they feel and the greater connection they'll feel with you. And the wonderful thing is, the more you give them pleasure, the more they tend to give you pleasure.
I found this one interesting. Tell him to touch you like he would a cat. If you play rough with a cat, it thinks you're attacking it. The same goes with the ladies' vaginas. I advise men to approach vaginas slowly at half speed and pressure that they touch themselves. Give it time.
And that's the most important thing, is time. Now, of course, that's part of learning about your partner, because there are some women who are really into doing things much more quickly and going for it. But the majority of women that I've run into generally like there to be more time
right.
and softness and gentleness. But there's, as I said,
Right,
always
there's exceptions to the rule.
And that's where learning your partner and asking them what they want rather than assuming what they want based on your previous partner is one of the ways to have so much more of a better sex life.
I thought this one was interesting. Tell me if you've experienced this in your therapy. Let's talk about socks. Wearing socks during sex can make us orgasm. Women's bodies are usually colder than men's. Plus, socks makes us feel cozy, relaxed, and gets our mind ready, feel more sexy.
That's one of the things that's going to vary from people to people out there. Some people, would be fine with that. Other people would think it would look, to some people, it would look very different for somebody to be wearing socks to bed. This is something you learn about with your own partner. Some couples, for instance, love to make love on the top of the bed without any sheets or blankets. Others like to really burrow into the blankets and have sex under blankets, and they like to have a lot more warmth. So this is just something you individually learn and you question, but you try out new things. That's one of the great things about sex, is this life. There's so many things that can be done with this magnificent mind and body that we have. And so you're just searching for ways to pleasure it and try new things. There are things out there to feel like, what does it feel like to just slowly draw a towel across your body or across your partner's body? What does it feel like to just go down the back of their neck and just sort of breathe on their neck and down their spine? There's so many sensations we can enjoy and ways that we can dress or undress that given for a particular couple can feel better than for others. And this is part of the joy, is explore, have fun.
Well, that's the next comment I was going to say. Is sex should be fun. Couples tell me they have sex because they're horny, to get close to each other, and obviously to feel good about themselves. But what about having fun? They say that it's supposed to be fun. I mean, if it's not, you may try something different.
Well, you have to question what's happening, obviously, and that's part of the issues that I deal with in therapy is, what's happening, because generally, as I said, one person is feeling they're not having fun. And the best way to really enjoy sensuality is to have a good time and to feel good with what you're doing. So people come in because one or the other isn't feeling good with what's done, and that's sometimes it's just a matter of trying out different things physically. Other times, and a lot of the time, it is increasing communication about what feels good.
How about smell? Because it says here that great sex sometimes is about feeling sensual and indulging our senses and switching them on. And they said sometimes a scent, maybe it's orange or lavender or something like that, might get folks in the mood.
Oh, very much. Smell can be very much a part of sex. There's various scents out there. There are pheromones, which are things that are put out as far as scents that sometimes we can't fully detect consciously, but we're affected by. One of the most basic things people can do is just burn scented candles and enjoy that. Some people like to do incense. Sensation, and then part of sensation is sound also. Music can be something wonderful. So one of the ways to enhance sensuality sometimes is to play some type of music both of you enjoy, while at the same time having scented candles. So setting the mood is one of the ways to increase sex, is having other sensations that are adding more pleasure, which is scent or sound, potentially. Although there are couples that absolutely love total silence. So again, it's something you experiment with.
Or with the lights on or the lights off, right?
Oh, very much so.
I mean, over there. We have a quick call here. We got a few minutes. Hi, thanks for calling. You're on with Dr. Don.
Hi, Dr. Don. My name is Jessie. I just had a quick question.
Hello, Jessie.
With you being...
With my being...
Hello?
Yes, I hear you. Jesse, what were you saying?
Oh, you can't hear me. Okay, I'm sorry. I was so confused.
That's
okay, so I don't know if you're married or if you're dating anyone or not, but I was wondering, with you being a sex therapist, do you find that women are intimidated by you?
No, not really. I make them comfortable because I've talked to many, many hundreds of women individually, and they've told me things that at times they haven't told their best girlfriends. I'm somebody who right away talks about people being able to say anything to me, that I've worked with so many, literally thousands of people, that I don't have any judgments about whatever they're going through.
When you're in a dating situation, where somebody is dating you, have you found that they're intimidated by all of your knowledge? That maybe they might be inadequate with somebody of your mental capacity?
It varies with anybody out there, both men and women. I have men who complain about being intimidated by women who they find particularly intelligent or in various careers. Yes. So there's some out there that wouldn't feel comfortable with me as a sex therapist because they would figure that I knew all this stuff. But it's always a personal learning out there. So that exists in a variety of ways. So yes, that can exist. But the basic thing, if you encounter somebody who's uncomfortable, is you talk to their discomfort. You communicate,
so
and you let them know that you're open.
Communication's key. Okay.
Yeah, and I found that once I talk with them, they tend to be very comfortable with me, whether I happen to be in a dating situation.
Very intimidated by you.
Well,
I'm usually not shy, but I have a feeling that around you, I would be super shy.
Well, you'd be very surprised. I've had a lot of women who've come into the office and they were shy at first, and they opened up very much to talking with me. And also in my dating situations, I've also encountered that. So it's a matter, but you see, I happen to be a sex therapist, but other people out there are doing many, many other careers that people are intimidated by or have concerns about.
That's true.
It's a common issue, and the main thing
that
solves
so much sense.
Yeah, the main thing is communication, is being able to touch each other's minds, and that is what really can allow the ultimate in comfort.
Yes. You're wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm really glad I called you. Have a wonderful night.
Well, Jesse, you have a wonderful time out there and many enjoyments in life.
Thanks for calling.
Thank you so much, Dr. John. Have a great night. Bye.
Bye now.
This comment says men are more insecure than women about men are more insecure about sex than women. When women are insecure about sex, they're aware of it, but men are less in tune, and they need to feel special and wanted. So compliment them and show them you care. Have you found that to be the case?
Basically, that's the most important thing, is caring. That's what really opens up, sensuality, is to feel caring. And again, I keep repeating the word that I want people to realize that goes on, is safe. Both men and women want to feel safe to a certain extent. I really appreciated Jesse's call because it speaks to, again, people feeling intimidated. It's about feeling safe. That's what the opposite of intimidation is. And regardless of training, for instance, I'm trained as a sex therapist, but there's always people that please one person more or less than another. It doesn't matter of just book learning. It's how they connect with each other as a person. And regardless of what somebody's job is, no matter how much money they have or how little money they have, whatever their orientation is, it's a matter of helping that person to feel comfortable with you and you feeling comfortable with that person. And that's always a dance in terms of knowing and being within a relationship. And just part of that is sexuality. Just being safe and feeling good with that person is the hallmark of really having pleasure, whether it's sexual or just being next to them watching television or a movie.
Do you find that couples sometimes just are stuck in a rut? They just can't get out of the rut they're in, whatever that may be, sexually, and seeing you expands their perspective and helps things out?
I think when I hear the word rut, I'm hearing somebody doing something over and over again that's leading them to be uncomfortable. See, it's perfectly fine for a couple to do things over and over again as long as they feel good with it. But generally, a rut, the way people use it, they're referring to something that goes on. But part of what I'm trying to say is it's fine to do the same thing over and over again as long as you're getting results that feel good for both of you. But just generally in a long-term relationship, that's one of the big issues, is that people keep doing things over and over again that don't feel good. And part of what I teach is to open up to new experiences so that you can enjoy learning together and feeling the delights of something new. So that's something that people have to watch out for in terms of what have they been doing in their life that isn't working for them.
Well, and along those lines, another big issue is boredom.
Yes, it depends on one or the other. I mean, I generally see that one person may be feeling that more than another, and the answer is to do things differently. Like I said, I've known many couples, they've never once gone to a love boutique. They've never once gone ahead and learned how to do massage together.
Yeah,
do
massaging.
Something different. That's one of the recommendations that I have for couples, is learn. They can go online or they can get in-person lessons and better learn how to massage and touch each other. There's so many ways to do things. Sometimes it's just getting out of the house and doing vacations or getting away for a night rather than just being in the same place endlessly. Even if it's a beautiful place, sometimes a change of location helps, as well as learning about your head and your heart together. because sometimes no matter what location you go to, you carry your mind with you. So you got to make sure that's connecting well with the other person first.
Well, they say wherever you go, there you are.
Yeah.
And that brings us full circle to how we started the show with different places couples have had sex. And almost 60% have said if they had it outside the bedroom, could even just be in the kitchen, for goodness sakes, they feel that it made their sex and their relationship better.
And that's one of the ways that people move forward, is just learning that there's so much to explore and enjoy together out there.
And that has been our show today, Secrets of Sex Therapy with Dr. Don. And the show is Great Sex with Dr. Don. I'm your host, Walt Lusk, with Dr. Don Etkes. How do we find you? You said you have offices in Westwood and in Claremont.
Yeah, and my phone number, if anybody wants to consult with me for an appointment, it's 310-405-9814. Again, 310 area code 405-9814.
And again, you can write us at info at Great Sex with Dr. Don, and we read obviously everything that comes in, and we promise we will address your issue, challenge, or question on air. And you can find us on Stitcher, iTunes, iHeartRadio, here at UBN, Universal Broadcasting Network, every other Monday at 7 o'clock, and of course, YouTube. So that's our show, and
remember, enjoy yourself. And if you can't enjoy yourself, then please enjoy someone else. This is Dr. Don wishing you the best of life.